renewable and decarbonized gases are the heartbeat of the energy transition. They will decarbonize those parts of the energy system that cannot be electrified. And the gas infrastructure that will carry and store these clean gases will be like the veins and arteries of the energy transition.
Affordable biogas, biomethane, and hydrogen will all be needed for the decarbonization of the pulp and paper industry.
At DC Brain, we make so-called digital network twins that can model how gas flows, pressure, and quality mix propagate through gas networks.
The new enabling policy framework has the potential to increase the availability of renewable gases and ensure that they are affordable for the industry and the energy transition.
And we strongly believe that digital solutions are the key answer to the challenges the gas industry is facing today. Increased complexity, dynamic gas inflows, gas blending requirements, and also sector coupling.
Gas targets, gas blending, and guarantees of origin for renewable and decarbonized gases are essential for a faster energy transition.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's my great pleasure to welcome you to this, our second Let's Meet of 2021, on what is a lovely spring morning here in Brussels. And what an interesting topic we've got to discuss today, because we'll be looking at one of the most important legislative initiatives of 2021, the Renewable Energy Directive. Whether we're calling it 2 or 3, we could probably ask one of our keynote speakers in a moment. But indeed, not very long since we actually came to the last agreement on the Renewable Energy Directive. Under the Fit for 55 package, it's been deemed necessary to open it again to make sure that indeed we are able to reach our ambitions on climate change. And so today we're going to be looking at our renewable ambitions within the context of that Fit for 55, that's easy for me to say, package. And indeed, we will be taking a deeper look onto what role for gas within that new legislative, well, should we say, recast, amendments of the existing framework. We do indeed have a very, very expert panel for us today. We're very lucky to have Antonio Lopez from the European Commission, who'll be giving a short presentation on the current state of play of the revision of the Renewable Energy Directive. We'll also be joined by Roxana Calaminti, who is the Deputy Secretary General at Gas Infrastructure Europe. We also have the energy intensive industries represented by Margosya Ryback from the Confederation of the European Paper Industries. And we're joined by a startup in Europe called DC Brain, which is providing digital solutions, looking at how, as we mix different types of gases into the gas network, how we can actually manage that and make sure end users get what they want. So very happy to have Geert Muhlenbelt with us this morning. Now, I would say the most important thing about Let's Meet is you, the audience. And indeed, it will be very, very important that we do maintain an interactive approach to this discussion. And I'm very happy to say that we're taking questions. And so after each of the speakers' intervention, I will take 1 or 2 of the questions that you, the audience, would like to put to our experts on this topic and see the responses that they have. But this way, at least we can encourage dialogue in these difficult times, still with the pandemic, still working from home. And indeed, I think it is important we take the opportunities to ask the questions that we'd like to receive answers to. So to use the chat function, sorry, the question box, I believe, actually, yes, the Q&A function, not the chat function. Use the Q&A box, put your questions in. Please include your name and indeed the organization you're representing for the context. And that way we'll be able to make sure we're getting the right answers for you. Now, without further ado, please, ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome our first speaker. As I say, Antonio Lopez from DG ENA, who will be giving an overview of the current state of play on the Renewable Energy Directive. Antonio, good morning.
Good morning, James. Good morning, everybody. Let me take this virtual background, which makes me, yeah, I think now you can see me well. I don't know if I can have my slides charged somewhere uploaded.
Yes, they should be coming up. There we are.
Okay, that's fantastic. So good morning, everybody, and thanks, James and Eurogas, for the invitation. Indeed, crucial times for the revision of the Renewable Energy Directive. As you know, we are working on an amendment of this directive within the context of the Fit for 55 package. I say an amendment because it's not a full revision, it's not a full request as we had in 2016 to 2018, where we changed a large part of the directive. This time is a more limited amendment to update the current renewables directive to the ambition of the climate target plan and to the ambition of the European Green Deal and its different strategies such as energy system integration. In parallel to this review, it's important also to bear in mind that the current directive, RED II from 2018, is being implemented and transposed by member states. Transposition deadline is June 2021, and this remains a very clear priority to bring into motion all the benefits and all the measures that the current renewables directive has. Having said that, we started the process to amend the directive about a year ago, and we've been consulting extensively with stakeholders. What you see on the screen is the main feedback from the open public consultation that we ran from November till February, where we've got 38,000 replies. The main look and feel of the replies was in the direction of clearly recognizing the importance of the Renewables Directive to deliver on the EU climate ambitions on the 55% emission reduction. This was supported by 98% of the participants. There is a clear recognition that the Renewables Directive needs to be more ambitious if we want to make it there, and if we want to make it there cost effectively. So this was clearly recognized by a majority of participants with a very clear support from business organizations. So out of the areas where change is needed according to stakeholders, there was clearly the overall target and transport coming on top, together with forest biomass. So those were the three areas that attracted more attention in the open public consultation. For the overall target, the replies went in a direction of supporting an increase of the target. So 80% of the replies supported an increase of the target, of the overall renewables target, at least to the level of the climate target plan. So moving from the current 32 to a level at least of 38%. So 43% of those supported a target of 38 to 40, and 37% prefer higher targets than 40%. Also, the question of having national binding targets was supported by a majority of respondents. 61% of respondents supported targets being binding at both EU level and national level. So that's important, going back to the previous RED I framework. Also, on the other areas, it's also very worth to flag that there was also a strong support to increase the transport target to the level of the climate target plan or above, meaning moving from the current 14% to levels of 24%. There was also support to increase the heating and cooling targets. The climate target plan indicates a renewable sharing heating and cooling of 39%. The current NECPs bring us to 33%. So there is a clear support to go to the levels of the climate target plan. And also, as final element, there is a strong support for um, facilitating energy system integration, especially all that has to do with electrification and electrification of the end use sectors, but also the rollout and deployment of renewable and low carbon fuels and gases, especially for the hard to decarbonize sectors. So this was also a priority that came after electrification, but that came in a strong way from the public consultation. Finally, there was a high number of replies, specifically on bioenergy, with a specific campaign and replies on that front, highlighting the need to stop the use of biomass for energy and burning biomass for energy purposes. So that was in a nutshell the feedback from the open public consultation. This is not the only consultation activity we've held. We've had a couple of specific workshops with stakeholders, very well attended, that allowed us to get additional feedback and quite a few other direct interactions with stakeholders. So that's for the open public consultation. Now moving to the content of the directive. If I can have next slide, please. So the context of the review, as I mentioned, is clear. I mean, the main trigger is the climate target plan and the need to increase the overall share of renewables in order to contribute to the 55% emission reductions cost effectively. The energy system is 75% of emissions, so the need to act is clear in that regard. Next to that, the work done on energy system integration and hydrogen with the strategies published last year is a clear trigger for the actions of the Renewable Energy Directive. So we are trying to create a system, an integrated energy system fit for climate neutrality around three main principles: energy efficiency and circularity, electrification, and renewable fuels, including hydrogen, for the hard to decarbonize sectors. So the directive is looking at these actions coming from the strategies and try to enshrine them into the legal framework. But it's not only that. We are also looking at elements coming from the renovation wave, which was issued last year, in order to promote energy efficiency and renewables in buildings. Elements coming from the offshore strategy, trying to unlock the high potential that offshore renewable energy has to deliver on the climate and energy goals. And indeed, the elements from the biodiversity strategy, ensuring a higher level of biodiversity protection with the Renewables Directive, looking at the sustainability criteria for forest biomass. Indeed, in this context, the role of gas is important and is being looked at. It's part of the climate target plan, and there we see a strong contribution of the gas sector to the climate and energy targets, with a clear shift of the gaseous energy mix, and with a clear need to have renewable and low carbon gases playing this role in the decarbonization of the hard to decarbonize sectors, and complementing other decarbonization options such as direct renewables uptake, energy efficiency, and electrification. So if I can have the next slide, please. So this is a bit the same thing, but in terms of the areas we are looking at in the review, one clear area we are looking at is the overall renewable target, and how and which, I mean, how these targets should be designed, and what should be the right level of the target so that we can achieve the goals of the directive. So this is one clear area of action. Second clear area of action is energy system integration. All the transversal measures that we've flagged in the energy system integration and hydrogen strategies that might need to be brought forward in legislation. I mean, this includes electrification, as said earlier, but also how to facilitate renewable gases for the hard to decarbonize sectors and fuels at large. So there are then what we call sector-specific measures. I mean, looking at the ambition of the different sectors and of the existing provisions of the Renewable Energy Directive, and see to which extent the numbers, but also the measures, need to be enhanced. I mean, this includes transport and heating and cooling that are part of the current renewables directive, and where the numbers might not be fully in line with what the climate target plan says, but also looking at buildings, industry, and electricity. So these are things we are looking at. Also, all that has to do with bioenergy sustainability is important, and how to respond to the increased ambition of the European Green Deal in that regard, and how to strengthen the existing sustainability criteria which have been implemented. I mean, those are, for example, the ones coming from forest biomass are new and were adopted in 2018 and are being implemented by member states now. So how to enhance those elements if need be to meet the ambition of the European Green Deal. One last word is that starting by what I mentioned at the beginning, this is part of the overall Fit for 55 package, which has many other pieces of legislation coming together at the same time, but also a second part coming by the end of the year. This includes the of interest for the gas sector. This includes primarily the hydrogen and gas markets decarbonization package, which we are looking at also in a very coordinated way with the review of the Renewable Energy Directive. So that's all I wanted to say for my introductory remarks. So thanks a lot for your attention.
Thank you very much, Antonio. That was a very good, comprehensive overview of what's going on. And I know you've got your hands full, 38,000 responses to the public consultation, and now making sure that you respond to those and take into account all of the different needs and interests of different stakeholders, as well as what has to be done to achieve our climate objectives. I'm glad to say we've got a few questions for you, as you would expect, Antonio. And I think I'll start with Giulia Bedini, who's a journalist at MLEX. And indeed, I think you mentioned in one of your slides that there's been some pressure again for what we had in RED 1, if you like, the national binding targets. Are you considering national binding targets again on top of the EU-wide ones, or are you going to stick to the EU binding approach?
Yeah, thanks a lot for the question. I mean, indeed, those are some of the things we are looking at in the context of the impact assessment. I mean, how to deliver on the increased ambition and what's the best target structure to have a timely delivery of those potentially increased renewable targets. So indeed, national binding targets is one of the options. The other logical, obvious option is what it came with RED 2, which is a system of a EU level target together with with national contributions under the EU governance. Both systems, I mean, have advantages and disadvantages, and this is the sort of thing we are looking at in the context of the impact assessment. So as said, I mean, a bit too early to come to conclusions on that front.
No, indeed. It's good. I think it's one of those. It's a debate that's often raised again. We didn't have it in RED 2, and maybe now people are thinking that's a time that would be looked at again. But okay, I think we'll move on from that question. We've got Floris van Hervel, who's from Shell as well, asking a question about: will the RED revision ensure that hard-to-abate industrial sectors, they mentioned steel and cement, but it could be others, can consume larger quantities of renewable and low-carbon energy, and including low carbon in that? And just before we take that, I also received a question from Michel Raquet, the advisor of the Greens group in ITRI, in the ITRI committee, asking if, I'll paraphrase it, asking if you are going to be keeping the Renewable Energy Directive only for renewable energies, or are you going to also be including low carbon energy within the Renewable Energy Directive? I think they're linked, so I'll put them together. Apologies to both Floris and Michel, but I think you can cover both of the questions in the answer, I think, Antonio.
Yeah, so thanks to both for the questions. I mean, starting by the question on renewable versus low carbon fuels. I think the clear priority for the EU is to deploy renewable fuels, so such as renewable hydrogen. So this is clear. This is the most compatible option we see with climate neutrality, and this message came across very clearly from the energy system integration and hydrogen strategies. And if we look at the way those strategies are conceived, we see that the way the measures are being defined establish this clear priority. For example, all that has to do, and this I'm also partially replying to the other question on industry. I mean, some of the measures we see clearly focus on renewable hydrogen. For example, all that has to do with end-use quotas in hard to decarbonize sectors. So are being looked at in the context of renewable hydrogen, not in the context of low carbon hydrogen, because we see a clear priority for renewable hydrogen. Obviously, I mean, low carbon hydrogen is seen also as needed for the energy transition, to rapidly reducing emissions from existing hydrogen production and support the parallel and future uptake of renewable hydrogen. So there is also a role to play for low carbon fuels, in particular for low carbon hydrogen. And this is why the strategies, energy system integration and hydrogen also define a number of key actions which intend to create a level playing field and for renewable and low carbon fuels to play a role in decarbonization, and this includes, for example, the definition of the different fuels and gases, and it includes also a EU certification system that allows us to be able to present the different emissions of the different fuels across the life cycle, and these are things that are being looked at in the current Commission work. The location of those elements in terms of the legal technique and the legal act are still to be decided. So I should be prudent and careful in that regard. What's very clear is that, I mean, the Renewables Directive is a directive for the promotion of renewable energy sources, and it will continue being the case.
No, thank you for that, Antonio. Relatively tricky question. I think you've given a clear answer, and I appreciate that. I'm going to let you off the hook in 1 second because I know there's also time we need to move on. But Alexandra from Cogen and Eleanor from BEIS in the UK government have asked related questions. One's about, are there criteria to define what are the hard to decarbonize sectors? And Eleanor's sort of following up and saying, in relating to heating, have you explored the possibility to use hydrogen because it can be quite expensive to decarbonize heat, and maybe hydrogen offers a route? Obviously, we know the UK government is looking at that. Antonio, is there some sort of criteria for hard to decarbonize sectors?
I think thanks again for the question. The hydrogen strategy was very clear on that, even if of course there is always a degree of interpretation of what's hard to decarbonize and what's less hard and harder to do. But when we look at specifically at hydrogen, I mean, we were speaking about two main lead markets, and those were transport and industry. I mean, those where the way to decarbonize cannot easily rely on direct renewables penetration, such as the power sector, or cannot rely on direct electrification. So there are a number of processes in industry that clearly fall into this hard to decarbonize definition, such as, I mean, all that has to do with the steel sector, some elements, some high temperature processes that were actually, I mean, fuels are really and renewable gases are really needed to be able to decarbonize. Next to that, we have transport and elements of the transport sector that cannot be easily electrified. And there, I mean, aviation and maritime come clearly on top, but also heavy duty, the heavy duty sector, heavy duty transport is also very important. Now, I mean, when it comes to hydrogen, I mean, the amounts of hydrogen that we want to and that we ambition to produce by 2030 are 10 million tons, according to the goals of the transport of the hydrogen strategy. And of course, there is no unlimited hydrogen at very cheap prices to use hydrogen everywhere. So I think there is a clear need for using hydrogen in those lead markets where they are actually needed for achieving climate neutrality. And I think that's the first and foremost priority, to try to make it to climate neutrality at the lowest possible cost, which is the goal we are trying to achieve.
Thank you, Antonio. And I have to say, I really appreciate it. We've spent almost half of the event together talking, but I think that in fairness, there are a lot of questions for you. And I think that there's a good reflection of how people are interested, but I must also move on for the other panelists. I really appreciate the answers, and thanks very much for the candid replies that you've given, Antonio. Great to have you with us this morning. I would like to move on to Roxana Kalaminti, the Deputy Secretary General of Gas Infrastructure Europe. Indeed, a very important association leading a very progressive line on the future of the gas infrastructure. Roxana, you've heard a lot from Antonio today. We've also seen in his slides that there'll be a sector-specific target for electricity. I'm wondering what GIE is thinking about targets and about the Renewable Energy Directive in general. Over to you.
Thank you very much for the invitation, James, and really thank you very much, Antonio. Really good input that actually correlates to what I also meant to provide you this morning with. So gas infrastructure operators, this is who we are, and we are ready to facilitate the take-up of renewable and low carbon gases. Today, we are providing energy in form of gas for 25% of the total primary energy consumption in Europe. The energy that heats houses, hospitals, schools, shops, office buildings, the energy that fuels our cars, buses, airplanes, ships, and vessels. So basically the energy that brings us clean and affordable transport, and the energy that powers our industrial processes. In a nutshell, gas infrastructure operators get the energy to people that helps them lead the safe, predictable, and affordable lifestyles they want to lead, with natural gas at its heart. But that's today, at least. Now, looking ahead, the plan is to decarbonize the entire energy system, to have more and more renewable and low carbon gases. This will decarbonize, indeed, those parts of the energy system that cannot be electrified. And thank you very much, Antonio, for highlighting that. Because the gas infrastructure that will carry and store these clean gases will be indeed like the veins and arteries of the energy transition. And growing demand for renewable and decarbonized gases means that we'll need to transport, store, import, and export large volumes of gases in various different forms. And Europe's gas infrastructure is up for this challenge. We welcome the revision of RED II, definitely. However, this revision needs to be properly designed to allow a full decarbonization that is fit for climate neutrality by 2050. We need the right conditions for an EU-wide market for renewable and low carbon gases to scale up. Now, I'm going to highlight 4 important conditions that the gas infrastructure operators believe will define the success of the revision of RED II. First of all, a clear, straightforward, and common European terminology for renewable and low carbon gases will help both consumers and investors to take proper educated decisions. And a consistent EU legislation will glue them together if it is done right. So first, such terminology will allow the consumer to be informed, to be able to take an educated decision for himself for what type of energy he wants to consume. The terminology should be based on science and should guide the consumer in a technology-neutral way. It should be the right of everyone to decide on their energy choices based on individual needs, because these differ from one country to another, from one region to another, and from one individual to another. That is why technology neutrality is the way to climate neutrality if we want the energy transition to be efficient and affordable. And second, investor will also play a key role here, and they need certainty about the low carbon gases production. Clear terminology will give them that. The second point that I wanted to make is that member states should be obliged to issue GOs, guarantees of origin, for all renewable and low carbon gases. As things stand today, it is only optional for member states to issue GOs for clean energy from non-renewable sources. This is no good. Clean energy consumers need to know the energy they are consuming is clean. They need traceability, and GOs must be compulsory for all forms of clean and renewable energy. Here's one example, for example, of the lack of consistency that needs further attention. The EU hydrogen strategy recognizes the benefits of low carbon hydrogen in the transitional phase to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. But we don't yet have a proper framework for GOs for low carbon gases across Europe. So consumers can't benefit properly from them. And so it's much harder to scale them up. That means full GOs and removing the existing loopholes in Article 19 of RED II that allow governments to withhold GOs. Moreover, if we want to boost the development of a robust pan-European market for GOs, then renewable gas produced and certified in one country, but consumed in another, should count towards the latter country's contribution to the binding collective EU target for 2030s. That is the country where the consumption of this certified renewable gas is registered. Third point I wanted to mention is that EU needs a harmonized certification system based on guarantees of origin, including associated greenhouse gas emissions and sustainability criteria. GOs and sustainability certificates fulfill complementary functions, and a link between both documents will help avoid double disclosure of the same energy or false claims on its origin by market participants. And in particular, greenhouse gas content and sustainability information should be included within the GOs, because this could offer EU ETS operators an additional sufficient instrument to cover their emissions limits and obligations. The fourth point I wanted to make, and the last one, is that targets are important. They incentivize member states to develop clear pathways to progressively introduce renewable and low carbon gases. And they improve predictability for investors. So we think it will be key to have technology neutral binding national targets for renewable and low carbon gases. To set these targets at the right level, we'll need an impact assessment focusing on the achievability for member states, including on the feedstock availability. Once properly defined, these targets could be complemented with national support schemes built on existing RED II mechanisms and relying on a target setting approach for end consumers, like, for example, it is the case for transport. One way of complying with the targets should be to use credible EU-wide certification based on GOs, including associated greenhouse gas emissions and sustainability criteria. Thank you very much, James. And I think for now, that's it from my side. Just a teaser for further discussions.
No, thanks very much, Roxana. Just very quickly, a quick follow-up question to what you've been saying. You talked about targets. How do you see the best design, and what is the level of ambition that you have in mind for targets? So maybe just clarify that briefly.
Yeah, so we like targets. Targets give us all direction, structure, and the way forward to more renewable and low carbon gases. Firstly, we believe there has to be an EU level renewable gas target. And the GIE, we believe that 11% of all gas consumed in the EU should be renewable gas if we want to achieve EU climate ambition to cut greenhouse gas emissions by 55% by 2030. So this target should be introduced in the EU Renewable Energy Directive. This binding target is supported by two sub-targets for 8% sustainable biomethane and 3% renewable hydrogen, because they need additional incentives compared to the incentives required to scale up blue hydrogen, for example. The sub-targets reflect that biomethane is commercially available today and scalable in a sustainable manner, and green hydrogen should ramp up during the 2020s too. We mentioned targets, but this is not all. We also need an EU-level greenhouse gas intensity reduction target. So each renewable and decarbonized gas typology production pathway must comply with appropriate sustainability and emission reduction criteria in line with RED II and future European legislation. Now, the tricky question, I think, and I think we can all agree on that, is how we design these targets to unlock the market for clean energy. A GIE, we first think that targets should be extended to cover all renewable and decarbonized gases. Secondly, member states shall be free to define their individual national contributions towards the EU-level greenhouse gas intensity reduction target and EU-level renewable gas target no later than June 2024. Thirdly, when setting their national contributions towards these targets, member states may do so, amongst others, consider by means of measures targeting volumes, energy content, or greenhouse gas emissions, as well as being free to establish differentiated sectorial targets and obligations. What is the role of the European Commission in all this? We think that it will play a key role to facilitate the coordination between the member states in areas where a common approach is necessary to enable an effective implementation. So, for example, as it is the case for gas quality standards, blending standards, transport, distribution and refueling infrastructure, but as well accelerated research, innovation, and new technology development. That I think will be the way forward, James. And yeah, let's discuss further.
That's great and very comprehensive answer to the question. I think a lot of detail there, and I'm sure that maybe some of the participants will want to follow up with you direct questions on that. So thanks for that, Roxana. I will move on to our next guest, Margosya Ryback, who is the Climate and Energy Director from the Confederation of European Paper Industries. Good morning, Margosya. Very happy to have you with us here this morning. Your sector, of course, is a very large energy user. You're part of the energy-intensive industries. And recently, you also brought out a very interesting paper on competitive low-carbon energies. So yeah, we're very happy to hear your views on what kind of ambitions there should be for the European Union in relation to renewable energy. The floor is yours.
Thank you, James. I'm very excited to be here and hear from the Commission also what their plans are, because I guess we're all interested what is in store for us. But maybe I'll start with a short introduction to our sector to give you a better idea where gaseous fuels can play a role in our decarbonization. So yes, we're one of the largest industrial energy users, actually the fourth largest. At the same time, we're the second largest electricity user among the industries. And at the same time, we're the biggest producer and user of industrial renewable energy, with 60% of our energy needs being met by biomass from our side streams. And this actually makes us one of the leaders in using renewables for industrial heating. And all this leads us to achieving almost 30% GHG emission reductions in the last 15 years. And with this new framework, and actually with the right policy framework, we think that we can stay competitive at the global level and at the same time contribute to the achieving of the new 2030 targets and climate neutrality by 2050. What is important for us to know about our industry is that virtually all our emissions come from combustion of fuels for electricity and heat generation. What this means is that it goes without saying that in the future we will need energy to produce heat. But the question is what sort of energy we're going to use. And the answer is clear that this energy needs to be clean. And CEPI represents almost 900 mills scattered across Europe. This means that any solution that they're going to implement at the mill level is going to be tailored to their needs and is going to depend on the circumstances, local, regional, national, be it the access to biomass, but also the legislation that is in place. And here, coming back to the paper that we recently published, we identify 5 different options. First of them is energy efficiency, because the best way to reduce the emissions is actually to reduce the energy use. And then we have different options depending on the specificities of your mill and on the products that you're producing. And that would range from electrification, maybe switch to biomass, maybe on-site renewable energy production. And then there are also part of the mills that are reliant on natural gas. And it is true that while we can reduce significantly the use of gaseous fuels, without breakthrough technologies, we will not be able to bring down this use to zero. And this is where, to a certain extent, we're going to depend on the decarbonization of the energy system. Here, we will need to have access to affordable biogas, biomethane, and hydrogen that is going to be delivered to us through the existing infrastructure or even off the gas grid with trucks with biogas supplying our CHP installations in the mills. And when it comes to the new framework, having access to affordable clean energy is one of the enabling factors for us to stay competitive and be able to reduce our emissions. And the Renewable Energy Directive can play a huge role in making sure that the availability of those new gases is there, and also still unlock the potential that is in our mills to produce biogas on site. So here we're talking about being able to produce biogas from sludge, from wastewater treatment in our mills, but also producing biogas from other waste streams from other industries that we can process on site. Here also the legislation can ensure that there is bigger cooperation and better cooperation locally between the users of biogas and local producers, so that can be mapped. And yes, something that is very specific to our industry and something that Antonio already mentioned is that we're pretty much involved in the entire value chain of forest biomass, from the sustainable sourcing to using and making sure that fibers are used to substitute fossil products. And it's not only about paper or board, but it's also about bio-based chemicals or textiles. And actually the blouse that I'm wearing today is made from bio-based textile. And this is why we believe that the approach that is in the Renewable Energy Directive at the moment, when it comes to making sure that the biomass that we're using is sustainable, is the right one. And we think that it might be a little bit premature to reopen the conversation that was very difficult to conclude and to find the agreement the last time. And yes, and with this, I think that I'm really looking forward to the questions that are being asked by our audience.
Thanks very much for that, Margosya. And indeed, I think it's very interesting, the approach. You've got the energy efficiency first, but then also looking at how you can also produce also from your own wastes, if you like, biogas on site. I think these are really very useful and very interesting insights that we have. I wondered if, when you were looking through your paper, if you had a view on things like blending of gases. This is something which is often talked about. How does the European paper industry see blending of renewable gases, hydrogen, if you like, into the existing gas infrastructure? Because you also mentioned getting your gases through the existing gas infrastructure, as well as perhaps some other solutions. So yeah, I wondered, how are you seeing blending?
Yes, when it comes to blend, that's an interesting discussion, because at the end of the day, we're not the producers, we're just using what is out there and what we can buy on the market. So from our perspective, the easiest what we can do is actually buy biogas and use it in CHP. Then there is no problem with biomethane and methane blending in the infrastructure. And when it comes to hydrogen and natural gas blending, as long as it's affordable, it is okay, we can use it. And as we believe that with some sort of blending, we will not be needing to change the infrastructure that we have in the mill. So that would lower the cost of decarbonization at the same time. But it is also in the conversation that we have internally, there are some concerns about, tracking the molecule, concerns about the safety, concerns about the standardization of the equipment when you receive the gas. But I think that we're all, like, in the transition, we're all together. So for us, it is important to have access to renewable energy, and whether it's going to be on the track or whether it's going to be in the pipe, we should be able to use it.
No, that's very, very helpful and very insightful, as I said already. I think that indeed, I mean, there is a lot of discussion about the impact of blended gases on industry. It sounds from your perspective that it's something that is manageable. But in fact, and I really thank you for this, Margosya, because you've given me a great segue into our final panelist, because you said about concerns about tracking the molecules and how this can be done. Well, thank you, Margosya. I will now invite Geert Moilenbelt, who is indeed the export manager from DC Brain, who are an innovative company, startup based in France, who are indeed providing digital solutions using artificial intelligence to do things like tracking molecules through the gas system. Good morning, Geert. I hope you can join us from Paris today. Just, there we are. Just
Sorry, I need to activate myself. Good morning, James.
Yes, good morning. You just heard Margosya saying that indeed blending doesn't pose a huge problem to the European paper industries, but they have concerns about tracking molecules. I think you might have some things to offer us on that front.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks very much for introduction, James. So while the presentation is being shared with you, my objective today is to tell you that digital solutions and artificial intelligence in particular may contribute to an orderly and also cost-effective deployment of low carbonized gases. Because the situation is not that easy as can be shown on the second slide. There's a lot of complexity when we speak about obtaining carbon neutrality. First of all, there's not only hydrogen and biomethane, and there's also there's blending of gases. And in particular for hydrogen, there's dynamic inflows. And we can all easily imagine that having 100% hydrogen for 1 hour and 0 for 4 hours, that still is 20% on average. But if this flow is regular, it will have a very different impact on the assets of the gas infrastructure. So that's an important element to take into account. And also the fact that inflows are much more local instead of centralized. And that requires energy traceability requirements. And also the energy sector, the gas infrastructure is more and more linked to electricity sector and also storage of in particular hydrogen. So what we did at DC Brain, and that's my last slide already today, but I will spend a little bit more time on that one, is we designed what we call digital network twins. So we take assets, the relationships between those assets, and the measurements that come from the network, the historical data from the SCADA systems, and we design what we call this digital network twin. If this third slide can be showed, please. Yes, perfect. So basically what that does, it models how the pressure drops throughout the network. And it also can model the different molecules and how they propagate through that network. And with that technology that took us a few years to make, actually, it's possible to address a pretty wide range of use cases. One we see it at the top is for invoicing, because we all know that the energy capacity of, in particular, hydrogen, it's much different from the natural gas. You need more volume to produce the same amount of energy. So for invoicing to end customers, it's important to know which part of green. And a digital twin can predict exactly at any point of the network what percentage of the gas mix is actually consumed at that particular point. Also, as I already mentioned, there's lots of requirements for this dynamic inflows and local sourced, particular hydrogen, to assess the impact of assets on the gas on existing assets and help the dispatchers of the gas make best and good decisions on how to operate their network on a very operational day-to-day basis. Moving a little bit further down the road, we can also think about optimizations. In particular, the first reaction is often to invest in chromatographs, so the measurement equipment on gas quality, but that's often very expensive investments. And a digital model really can help to reduce that investment in a very significant way in order to bring more value to end customer at a better cost. And also, if you take into account the whole sector, and particularly also the storage that is needed, it's very important to have the tools available from digital tools available to optimize and say what would be the predicted storage capacity on a particular day. And that really helps to get the most out of the overall renewable impact that networks can bear with the current technology, gradually moving towards a much more frequent use of renewable gases. And all this is packaged into an artificial intelligence engine, and that typically serves three purposes. Customer value, meaning more information to customers, know what they will consume as green energy. obviously also reducing costs, avoiding particular tariffs, lowering operational costs, and also put digital into the mainstream, because we firmly believe that digital solutions are a key contributor to the new energy directives out there. There is a more detailed document that we wrote at DC Brain that will be shared with you by Eurogas, where we delve a little bit in more detail on all these quite technical use cases, as you can see. But in the meantime, I will be most glad to take any questions on this very interesting, exciting topic.
Thanks very much, Geert. And indeed, I mean, the most important thing I can say, and the question I'll start with, I mean, this is a technology, a digital technology that you are using now. I mean, it's not something which is aspirational, that's in place. You don't have to name your customers, but you are implementing it. And maybe you could just say just a couple of examples of what you've been doing in the ground, in the field with gas infrastructure companies.
Yeah, we actually did quite a few projects already for the last 4 or 5 years at DC Brain. Both in France and also in other European countries, Romania, Belgium, on a various amount of topics. But the biomethane and natural gas blending requirement depends a little bit on the country where it is. But we have a few customers actually using this to make better invoices for the customers. So it's not a startup in the sense that it has a product idea, but it's actually already rolled out at several networks, and in an industrialized way, not in a prototype way. It's a really existing product.
Indeed, and I think importantly, it can help overcome some of those challenges that Margosya is raising about the tracking of molecules, particularly for end users as well. So if you're the infrastructure, you know where the molecules will go, and you can actually make sure that the end users get what they need. And I suppose that's one of the questions that's always been raised about blending and its risks to end users.
Exactly. But a little remark on that. We are a digital solution, and digital solutions need always to work in line with actual measurements on the field to increase their efficiency. So we are not actually physically binding the molecules with something like technologies that do exist, by the way, to link that. But we have the digital model to enable that.
Indeed, which actually then reduces the overall cost, because you don't need as many sensors, chromatographs, and these sort of things, because you can provide that digital twin.
Absolutely, that's exactly the case. Digital is a contributor. It's not a total, it's a part of an overall solution.
That's great. We do have that white paper that DC Brain have written. We have had a look at it. It's very interesting, ladies and gentlemen. We're very happy to circulate it and also answering questions. I'd like to bring Margosya and Roxana back. Antonio had to make his excuse. I'm afraid had to leave for another meeting, as of course we are at 10:28. But I want to take one final question and get all of your views on it, actually. And it's the last question we had from Martin van Hout, who's asking about guarantees of origin. And Martin is coming from Q8, by the way, active member in Hydrogen Europe. I fully agree that GEOs play an important role, but should, and it's actually was about your input, Mr. Calvinte, but it does actually count for both you, Geert, and Margosya. Should there be a dedicated system for hydrogen GEOs, biomethane GEOs, or should we just have a renewable gas GEO system? And if you have any views on why one form or the other would be better, I think we're good. Roxana, I think I'll start with you and then go to Margosya, ladies first, and then Geert, I'll come to you at the end to see also if you have something to say in relation to your product as to what would make sense on a guarantee of origin front. We're going to overrun slightly, ladies and gentlemen. Bear with us, it'll be 5 minutes. Roxana, please.
Yes, thank you very much. I think for us it's very important to keep the context within renewable and low carbon gases, and to make sure that they have eligible GEOs. Now, there are a lot of discussions about the design, but in general, we believe that GEOs should be based and dedicated to renewable and low carbon gases. And I think I would like to just go back a little bit to the blending point, because, for example, for the gas infrastructure operators, this is one important role of the decarbonization of the energy system. And we think that blending will be essential in the transition period when the hydrogen volumes are small, especially in the 2020s. So this is particularly relevant for those regions where there are not parallel or redundant gas pipelines easy to dedicate to hydrogen. And not all potential hydrogen consumers are located in those industrial clusters. Thank you very much.
No, thank you for that, Roxana. I think that makes a lot of sense also from our point of view in Eurogas. Margosya, how is the thinking in the European paper industries towards guarantees of origin, and which types of gases should be covered, or whether all should be covered under one guarantee of origin?
We had discussion about guarantees of origin when we discussed our paper on the ETS review and how to make sure that the use of those gases is easier. And one of the points that we made there is actually that guarantees of origin should be allowed as a purchase records under the EU ETS. But to be honest, we haven't really went so much into details, whether it should be renewable hydrogen or only biomethane. I think that this is something that we should discuss together with the suppliers, really, to make sure that we can benefit from the GHG emission reduction. And we come up with a system that is workable for the producers.
Yeah, well, we are, of course, very happy to continue that discussion with you, Margosya, and indeed, we will be very happy to discuss that. I think also Roxana would nod and agree as important customers of the gas system. Geert, so you'll get the final word today in this regard. Would you take any particular view on geos, or share more of the sort of, we're still formulating our opinions, as Margosya has said?
Yeah, I think digital solutions can predict with a very high degree of reliability, like 99% based on our experiences in the field, the quality mix of gas consumptions at any point in the network. But putting a stamp guarantee on us, that's not our job, basically. That needs to be done elsewhere. But as said, digital technology can really help create these certificates and ensure that the right information is at the right place for the right people.
Yeah, I fully. This is kind of what I would expect you to say here. So I think that's right. And I think that we do have the technology available to indeed track the molecule. And I think that's important when we're talking about guarantees of origin and the systems that we look at, either whether that's mass balancing or book and claim. And so, yeah, I do believe there is probably a role also for the technologies that you have developed to support those systems. But ladies and gentlemen, I have stolen 3 minutes from you. Over 200 of you still stayed with us. I appreciate that tremendously. It has been a superb discussion this morning. We have had insights from the European Commission on the current state of play. It's been great to hear the gas infrastructure's point of view about how we can move forward to achieve our renewable ambitions. Indeed, from the Confederation of European Paper Industries, Margosya has done a very nice overview of all of the different options that are available to them and the role of gases within that. And last but by no means least, we've had Geert, who has given us an insight into the technology and the digital technology using artificial intelligence that is available today to help us map and track the deployment of renewable and decarbonized gases into the energy structure that we have in Europe today. I must say thank you to all of our panelists. They've been really great, and it's been a real pleasure for me to moderate them. My job has been extremely easy, also because of the great input from you, our audience, and the tremendous amount of questions that you put forward. As ever, we haven't been able to answer them all, but you know, in Eurogas, we won't leave a question unanswered. So we will answer the questions and we'll upload the answers onto our LinkedIn profile within the next week or so. So you will be able to find answers to the questions that you've asked, very, very specifically responded to, but from a Eurogas point of view. And I know that you have probably put some of those in there for the European Commission, but nevertheless, we will give our views on those points. And so I must say thank you to the panelists, thank you to you, the attendees, thank you to my team for, as ever, doing an excellent job behind the scenes to make this run smoothly. I hope you've all found this interesting. I will leave with a point that indeed Antonio made when he said the role of gas is very important, and it's very much important in terms of achieving our climate target plan. Ladies and gentlemen, renewable and low carbon gas is going to be a tremendously important part of our energy system for the foreseeable future, and will be absolutely essential to delivering our carbon neutrality objectives, as we believe in Eurogas, even before 2050. Thank you so much for joining us. We look forward to seeing you at our next Let's Meet. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.